Hello there and welcome to the Eurogamer Newscast, and this week we're talking about Xbox's big changes to Game Pass on console. Joining me to talk about that, as ever, it's Eurogamer's news team. We've got Ed Nightingale.
Hello.
Victoria Kennedy.
Hello.
And I'm Tom Phillips. We're a little bit croaky voiced today. It was our summer party last night, so we are here, though, in spirit, as well as some slightly croaky bodies, to talk about this week's big news. And Microsoft, I think it had been suspected for a while, but it was still a surprise when it happened, came up with a completely simple and easy to understand set of changes for Game Pass, as well as price rises. But the big change, I think, that everyone has been talking about is that day one new game launches will not come to the standard Xbox Game Pass tier from now on. Which, is this the Call of Duty effect that we're seeing? Because
yes,
Black Ops is coming in later this year.
Yes, which I think is the funny thing people keep bringing up, that, you know, Phil Spencer was saying, once we get Call of Duty, we're not going to put the price up, and now that's exactly what's happened. Surprise, surprise. Which isn't much of a surprise because it feels like a very obvious thing to do, but
it's not much of a surprise. What I found quite interesting about yesterday or earlier this week's announcement is the fact that previously Eurogamer had messaged Microsoft to ask for clarification: will Call of Duty be locked behind a specific Game Pass tier? And they said no, but at that point they did not mention price rises. So they technically did tell us the truth at that point, but deliberately missed out the fact that they were going to be altering how the tiers will be financed, I suppose, by the community.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, they did already have Xbox Game Pass Core, and, you know, the assumption when you hear Phil Spencer say it won't be locked behind a specific tier is that, well, it wouldn't, that statement wouldn't apply to Core anyway. So he's already caveating it, and now there's this big new caveat, which is it won't come to Game Pass Standard, this new tier for Game Pass, which is being introduced to replace Xbox Game Pass for console, which I think as of now, I looked yesterday and I couldn't see a way to subscribe to it from here on out. So it's already sort of depreciated, or it's being depreciated. That will continue for now. Again, we don't really know for how long it will continue to be. Like, if you're locked into Game Pass for console now, do you always keep that as long as you keep your subscription running? Microsoft haven't really clarified that. They're limiting how long you can stack it, though, to 13 months.
Yeah, that was another, I thought, big point that was slipped in, was the stacking element of not being able to stack up a subscription, which is going to be, I'm sure, disappointing to a lot of people.
Yeah, it was very slipped in the small print. I mean, it's something that they changed for a couple of countries a while ago, and that's because of currency differences. It was a lot cheaper to do it in certain countries, so they wanted to stop people from doing that. But now that is blanket everywhere.
Yeah.
So what happens in 13 months, you know, or if, you know, does there come a point where Microsoft says, okay, we've let you have Black Ops and continue being a Game Pass for console subscriber, but the grace period is over. We really now just want to focus in on Game Pass standards. Do they drop everyone down? I don't know. I think, like, at some point they will consolidate this now legacy tier of subscribers that everybody's on. And at the end of the day, all of this, I feel, is a big push towards Ultimate. I don't know if you agree, but like, the Ultimate is clearly what they want people to subscribe to.
Yeah.
I mean, that still does get day one gains.
I was going to say, and I think doing this price rise now and having that ultimate incentive of the day one, they've announced it just after they've had that really quite impressive Xbox showcase where they have shown, like, we had Avowed, which will be a day one release. We had Doom next year will be a day one release, I'm pretty sure. Indiana Jones day one release on Game Pass, and so they have a strong slate of games that people will want to play day one. And so they've obviously coordinated their timing with this upcoming release schedule of incentive.
Yeah, in some ways, there's never been a better time to do this because everyone, just last month, we were saying it here, was praising Microsoft for probably their best ever show, or at least the best show in years that they've had. Like, just remembering the stuff that they had at that show. A new Gears of War, E-Day, terrible name, but people like Gears of War. Perfect Dark looked good. State of Decay 3 was there. There was a really packed slate of things for 2025, and um, there really hasn't been a better time for them to make the argument that actually you should be getting these games on day one. It is worth subscribing or upping your subscription to Ultimate because it will be worth it. When you boil down the costs of an Ultimate subscription, it's not cheap, but it is cheaper than buying all of those games individually, which is now the other option.
That's crucial.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start doing those mathematics, you're like, well, will I play 3 or 4 Microsoft games that they publish in the next 12 months? And for the first time in a while, I actually think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And it's not small games like Hi-Fi Rush. It's big, proper AAA games that are going to be sold for $70, like Gears of War. And so, yeah, I think the reason they've done it now is, yeah, absolutely, as you say, Victoria, off the back of that showcase and very deliberately separate from it so that they can have that moment and everyone cheers them and says, wow, Microsoft, finally. What did we say here? Like, is this the moment that it all finally, can Microsoft finally pull it off? This sort of dream that they've had for ages of having a really good content pipeline finally, like a really strong year. There's like 4 or 5 really big games all coming out from these studios. They bought them 4 or 5 years ago. Finally, we're seeing the fruits of that. I guess, well, there's never been a better time to do it. And all of this stuff does cost money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the money has to come from somewhere.
I think there are sort of 2 things for me that really will make games or will help make Game Pass a success. I think the first one is the perceived value of it. And for them to put the price up, there needs to be value behind that for that people want to pay for. And I think so far we haven't seen a lot of day one releases that are necessarily worth it, maybe. Xbox hasn't had a lot of exclusives. So Game Pass feels like a good deal of, pay this amount of money and you get access to all these games. But if they're not games people want, then no one's going to be buying that. And I think there's a lot of comparison with other streaming services like Spotify or Netflix. And, Spotify, yeah, you spend 10 quid a month, but you get access to basically every music ever, which is like good value. Whereas Xbox, it's like, well, what's the exclusive thing here for me to do this? And I think, yeah, they're putting the price up, but with all these games coming, there is a reason for that. So it feels like there's more of a reason to pay that extra money for that extra value that I don't think we've necessarily had until now. Now that we're seeing, this growth. So as you say, I think it's the better time to do it. I think the other thing is, as they keep going on about, is the growth of Game Pass, and they need to have as many people on it as possible. And one of the things that I think is really notable is that day one is on Ultimate but not Standard, but it's still on PC Game Pass.
Yes.
And I think that's noteworthy because what they want now is for everyone on console to bump up to Ultimate from Standard so they get more money out of them, but they want to still grow the entire user base of Game Pass. And accessing PC and saying, well, you guys still get it slightly cheaper and with day one is an even better incentive for PC players to now sign up to Game Pass. So I think that's a way of them growing outside of consoles as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Suddenly PC Game Pass looks like even more of a good deal. Because, PC games maybe slightly cheaper anyway, but still really, really good value. That is about tenner per month for PC Game Pass.
Yep.
Whereas Game Pass Standard is coming in at $15 a month, which I don't have the UK price in front of me, but
I think it's 12 quid or $12.99.
Yeah, that's already sort of more expensive than Spotify, Netflix, unless you're going for like the 4K top tier packages. Game Pass Ultimate, I mean, it's expensive. There's no other way around it. But if you're planning to play for Xbox games on launch, you start to do those sums. Will this convince either of you? If I can't remember off the top of my head what sort of Game Pass systems you're on, but say for the sake of argument that you were on console, or you weren't subscribed currently, would this push you to Ultimate over the other editions?
See, I would, because I am. I mean, I am already on what will be, or what is already now, that higher tier. But I would still, because like I said previously when we did this podcast about the Xbox showcase, I'm really excited about the upcoming slate of games, and I will be playing those games. So for me, it makes sense because, as we said, it is cheaper than buying the games individually. So yes, for me, it does make sense now, even though I would rather not pay as much because I like to save money. If it had been, let's say it happened around the launch of like 2020 when the Xbox Series X first came out, it wouldn't have done, because I wouldn't have had that same desire for the games that were available on Game Pass at that time, in the sense of like the big AAA releases. So again, it's a timing thing for me, and I think it makes sense that they've done it now.
I think for me, I'm on Ultimate. I don't know if I would necessarily want to push to it now, just because, like as Victoria said, Victoria's super into these day one games coming, and I'm less enthused by them. With Game Pass Ultimate, I'll give them a go for the sakes of it, but I'm not. I don't think I would necessarily pay for those games separately if I wanted to. So for me, like the joy of Game Pass has not been, oh, I get to play Halo or whatever other Xbox games, because they're just not games I'm necessarily into. But it's been really nice to access a load of really interesting indie games. Like I played Citizen Sleeper on Game Pass, which was one of my favorites in the last couple of years. I played Tunic on Game Pass, which is one of my favorites in the last couple of years. It's that level of game that I particularly like, and that I guess, can still access on standard without the need to go for Ultimate. And then if Starfield miraculously was an incredible 5 out of 5 game, then sure, I'll go buy it. And get that separately, rather than being locked into a subscription for games that I'm maybe not that fussed by. For me, I think ultimately it just comes down to what the games are, and I look at the Xbox slate and I'm like, I'll give them a go, but they're not games that I would buy a console for or buy Game Pass for. And that's just my personal taste. So I think for some people it's still really good value, for others it's not. And I do think it's a little complicated with all these tiers, and that's something that
it's extremely complicated.
That's something people criticized Sony for with PS Plus, with all the different tiers and who gets the classic games and who gets PS5 games or whatever else. People criticized that and said, oh, it's too complicated, and what tier do you go for? And the joy of Game Pass was just subscribe and you just get what you want. And now it's kind of split further, that it's sort of like, I feel Sony was copying Microsoft, and it's now almost like Microsoft have gone back and sort of copied a little bit what Sony are doing, which is quite interesting.
Do you think that Microsoft...
Sorry, you go, Victoria.
All right. Do you think Microsoft now is going to follow suit with Sony? So Sony has... They've said that they're not releasing like day one releases on PlayStation exclusively. They'll do it for like PC games. Am I making that up? But they're being slightly more conservative with how they release their big AAA releases on Game Pass. And so we have had Horizon come to Game Pass, but it was like a year after it was actually released.
PS Plus.
PS Plus, that's what I'm going for. Thank you.
Sorry.
So do you think now that Microsoft are going to start giving Game Pass games on the standard tier 12 months down the line? So like Indiana Jones will be available in 2025 for standard users.
I think that's one of the most interesting questions is, at what point does a day one game no longer become a day one game? And that's something that even Sony haven't got a solid answer for. I think the first one was I think the first sort of new game was Returnal, and that was a year after its release. So I think we thought that's going to be the standard of it will be a year later. That's when they get added. And I don't think they've quite stuck to that exact time frame. So it becomes a case of if and when they feel like it. And if Microsoft are now doing the same thing, again, that gives them some leeway for there's not a set time as to when a game will move from day one Ultimate into standard tier. And they can decide what that is, which makes our lives a little more complicated reporting on it, because we don't know exactly when it's going to happen. But also that gives them an extra headline of, oh, this month X new game comes to Game Pass Ultimate, and guess what? Now this game is available for everyone, and it gives them a nice little incentive for people. So I guess it helps to get the news rolling, and they can maybe use that if it's a slow month to be like, well, now you can all play Starfield on standard or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a year feels about right. Anything less than that, and you risk people just saying, well, I won't bother upping to Ultimate. I'll just wait. If it's 6 months, I'll just wait 6 months. I can wait 6 months to play Indiana Jones. It's not going anywhere. A year feels like enough of a, oh man, I won't play that until the date is a completely different year. Okay, I'll pay an extra few quid to be Ultimate. Yeah. But yeah, it is confusing. So we're going to have 3 different catalogs to keep track of. So there's the limited 25 games on Game Pass Core. There's the catalog that Ultimate people will have, which is the main catalog plus those day one games. And then Standard is going to have the main catalog, but without those day one games. So until they get added at some point, it is tricky to keep track of.
It is like I saw a post that someone put up on Twitter, X, whatever it's called now, and it was, this is Microsoft's super simple tier list, and then it was like 4 pages trying to explain it.
Yeah, which, you know, maybe that's just them again wanting you to go for Ultimate. You know, you get everything. Do I need to? Oh, I'll get Ultimate. Everything's in there.
Yeah, just for ease, you're like, oh, I'll just subscribe to that. I mean, looking at the perks of it, yes, the day one is the big main one. But there's also perks and discounts on games in the Game Pass library is now only Ultimate, which I'm guessing is a case of when games leave and you can still purchase it for a certain price.
Oh, you get the 20% off or something, don't you?
Yeah, that's now only Ultimate. EA Play and Riot Games is only Ultimate.
That was the case already.
Okay. And Xbox Cloud Gaming is also only Ultimate.
Again, was the case already. But yes.
But their incentives, again, that they're not putting into this new standard tier. So they are still
I
considered...
see what you... Yeah.
Yeah, so those things are still considered sort of premium for Ultimate. And cloud gaming is such a big deal that they're trying to spread, again, to grow Game Pass and say you don't... You know, the whole advert where that awful Scream wannabe advert of... you don't need an Xbox now, we'll still get you on cloud gaming. It's like, well, yeah, if you pay for Ultimate, you're not going to get that on standard.
Of course, I mean, yeah, that's another time where they've coordinated, because they just had that push of you don't need an Xbox to play Xbox games, you just need a Fire Stick and a Game Pass. And now they're like, Game Pass is now going up in price, just as we've done.
But you need the expensive version.
You don't need a console, but you need to pay a bit more for a subscription. Yeah, I actually hadn't clocked that was, because what Amazon, that announcement was, last week? So it's all been very... conveniently timed. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, PC Game Pass gets the discounts and EA Play and Riot, but just not cloud. So PC Game Pass is a great deal.
And so PC Game Pass is now the best deal, I think. If that's...
the only thing you're really not getting is the limited catalogue of games on console. But
yeah, you don't get the catalogue.
No. But they're presumably a lot of those games are on the standard catalogue anyway.
Yeah. A lot of those are sort of the Xbox back catalogue. Not all of them new. Yeah, I think it speaks to how, if you're on Xbox, if you were going to be a Game Pass subscriber, you probably are already, and so this is pushing people up to Ultimate. And on PC, there's still lots of people out there who are not Game Pass subscribers, and so keeping it a really good deal, I think there's room for Game Pass to grow on PC where there isn't on console. I think Microsoft knows that they've probably reached something of a saturation point. If you are a customer of theirs that has gone out and bought an Xbox, you were probably already subscribed to Game Pass. Whereas there are lots of people out there with PCs who are not subscribed to Game Pass yet, and they would quite like.
I guess Game Pass on console is directly competing with PS Plus, and now they can say, or they can still say, you get day one games on the expensive tier, which PlayStation doesn't offer. Whereas PC Game Pass really is competing with Steam, and considering you get the Steam sale where you can start buying games for 50p, they need to offer a good deal in order for people to subscribe on going to a library as opposed to just waiting for a Steam sale and buying what they want there. So it's like different, they're sort of competing on different fronts there, as much as they need PC Game Pass to grow to bring in more money.
Has the new Game Pass tiers, have they affected how the sort of trials and things are? Like, how PlayStation has trials and Game Pass purely did have little like tasted things? Has that been affected?
They're free weekends, yeah. I think those aren't changed.
What about you, Tom? As a sort of, you've been a long-term Xbox supporter, fan, as someone who has been so ingrained in Microsoft's sort of community from the beginning, do you feel that this has been a good move for them, or do you feel a little bit let down because you've supported them for such a long time?
I wouldn't describe myself as an Xbox fan. I have an Xbox. I don't have PS5. Yeah, and I don't know if I necessarily would say that I support them. Yeah, they are a console manufacturer, and I own their console. But I'm quite objective about that. I think it was somewhat inevitable. Yeah, I mean, it's also sort of the product of PlayStation being their rivals and PlayStation not having day one games, and there's absolutely zero chance that PlayStation puts their games day one in PlayStation Plus now, that they don't have to compete so much on that front with Xbox. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a Call of Duty fan, so for me, it does just make things worse and more expensive. So I'm not a huge lover of them doing this. It doesn't make my life easier or cheaper. So yes, but Game Pass needs to be profitable, more profitable. It needs to grow. Adding Call of Duty is a way to do that, but it also you have to balance the books. Yeah, I don't love it.
I also feel like this is a worse deal now for Series S owners, because that seemed to be, or at least from my understanding, was marketed a little bit as like the Game Pass machine. Like it's cheaper, it's digital, but you sign it to Game Pass and you get access to these games. But now those people, if they want, access to Ultimate, are going to have to pay more. But then also the games don't run as well on an S. So you want these day one games, but they don't run as well on the S, and you've got to now pay more for them.
You want more tiers. You want a different set of tiers for Xbox Series S
just
people.
Want one tier with everything. It would be a lot simpler.
Yeah. Well, there's lots still to find out. We don't know when games that don't come now day one do get added to the catalogue. That's definitely going to be an interesting thing to find out. We don't know how long they're going to continue supporting Xbox Game Pass for console people currently. Like, they're not going to turn that off before Black Ops, but that's basically all we know. Like, it could be in January they decide not to. The suggestion is they will continue doing it for a while because they don't want you to stack more than a year or 13 months. But yeah, I have a feeling that won't last forever. Yeah, interesting times. Right. Anything more to chat about on Xbox Game Pass before we wrap up?
No, but get stacking now while you can.
So,
yeah.
Stack while you can.
13 months. Yeah. In some ways, you could see that as another sort of push from Microsoft to get people paying money. The fact that they haven't immediately switched off stacking, I wonder how much money Microsoft made yesterday from people rushing to add on 13 months to their subscription, thinking, well, I better do it now quickly before before the deal gets worse again. It's Lando and Empire Strikes Back. Yeah. What's going to happen next? Yeah.
And then hope that people forget and just keep subscribing.
I mean, that's how I'm still on so many of my subscriptions.
Yeah. I just get used to the convenience of it and think, oh, I might as well keep it.
Yeah. Yep.
Subscriptions, eh? Right. On that note, thanks for joining. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, listening. We'll be back next week to talk about whatever Microsoft decided to do with Xbox Game Pass then, or something else. Until then, Ed, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me at ed_knights.
Victoria?
I'm at Little Chop Shop Gal.
And I'm at Tom Phillips CG. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.
See you then.
Bye.